we might move people around in a minute, but there's a few introductory points I wanted to make to explain to those of you who are not familiar about a learning resource project that Jim and I have been working on in conjunction with the members of our knowledge exchange group, many of whom are in the room. So this project's been running for a little while now, and I'll just explain a bit about it to set the context for the activity that we've got. So an overview of the drivers and the process, and then an overview of the resource itself before the activities. I've been jotting down bits during the course of the day of points that people have made that support things I've been talking about, and I've actually run out of paper because there are so many relevant ideas about the challenges that academics and universities face. We've been engaged in quite a program of activity of trying to evaluate what's already going on at UE, and the more we delve, the more we find, and the more support we come across for the kinds of activities that we're trying to promote across the university. But there are a few things that have been identified as common barriers, and I've heard them mentioned by others in the room as well today. And one of them is about uncertainty of what we're talking about when we talk about sustainable development. As was mentioned this morning in reference to the QAA guidance document, it almost doesn't matter what the definition is, but people want something to cling on to in terms of what you mean by sustainability. And when we've been speaking with heads of department and other academic groups at UE, and we talk about some of the social and economic issues as well as the environmental, the reaction has been, oh, I didn't realise sustainability is quite such a broad topic. And I think it's easy for those of us in the room who do this a lot to forget that there is a lack of awareness in our institutions. So that's a been identified in our institution as a big barrier to further engagement. The lack of time that's been mentioned, crowded curricula and so forth, and a lack of staff knowledge and a sense that this belongs to sustainability champions and representatives on knowledge exchange groups, and that's being done, that's Andrew's job or Sarah's job or Marcus's job, that's somebody else's responsibility and not mine, and that stems from a lack of knowledge. So one of the solutions, as part of a package of activities, is a generic learning resource, a very low-level basic introduction to sustainable development or sustainability. Because our knowledge exchange group is the Knowledge Exchange for Sustainability Education, which is known as KEYS, although KESE persists in some members of staff, but KEYS. Marcus had an inspirational thing for our learning resource to also be called KEYS, and all the metaphors associated with opening doors and ideas and that kind of thing. So we have our learning resource KEYS to Sustainability. The core original premise was that it would be appropriate for any level student. Our intention over the next year or two is for this to become part of level 1 induction. So every student coming into the university will undertake this program of activity. Appropriate for all disciplines, entirely self-directed, and there are, of course, pedagogical issues about how to teach sustainability, but the idea for this is an introduction to some of the jargon. And again, I think it's easy for us to lose sight of how much jargon there is in relation to sustainability. So the intention for this resource is very much about jargon busting, in terms of opening doors, giving students an awareness of the basic language of sustainability that will then allow them to undertake deeper discipline relevant study. So the breadth and depth that Simon was referring to earlier, this resource, very low level, gives the breadth that then in the context of disciplines that depth can then be pursued. So in line with the university's online teaching strategy, this will be delivered via Blackboard, which gives us access to all students via ISIS. We're looking at about 20 hours to complete, which is not particularly onerous, but allows us to cover a range of issues. And there will be a multi-choice test for them to demonstrate some understanding, so we can get a sense of we can give them a certificate of achievement that they have reached a certain threshold of understanding. Project principles, and lots of words here that will not be included, these jargonistic academic concepts, but the process of developing this resource has been very collaborative. The Knowledge Exchange Group is the steering group for it, but we've been engaging with academics across the institution at all levels. Lots of consultation going on at all stages of the process, very inclusive, staff and students. Hasn't been external engagement at this stage, but that's part of the project going forward. Another nice term from academia, business. Staff and students contribute to the resource development, and the intention is also that staff and students will engage with the resource so that they learn together, the staff know what learning the students have undertaken. Sense of community, academic robustness because of that collaborative approach to development, and all the while being cognizant of the need for pedagogical integrity. So the process, as I say, I've sort of outlined. The Keys group formulated a framework over a year ago now, and have been acting as a steering group, consultation been across the institution, support from our library, and there'll be an ongoing need for engagement with the library into how we make sustainability resources available to students. It's a particular issue of mine that at this university at the moment, sustainability resources are buried within geography as a subject heading, and I think that's not quite the right message, so we're working on that. Our technologists, like Ollie at the back, he'll be helping me with the workshop in a minute, have been critical, and we have a student advisory panel, which is a large group of students, and when there are consultative activities, they're all emailed, and we get subsets of that group turning up to any one event. So continuous testing along the way. What we want the resource to do is to outline key elements of sustainability, which is what the workshop will focus on. We want an awareness of scale from the very personal, and I guess there's more focus on the personal in terms of the resource, encouraging students to feel that sustainability is relevant to them, to their lives, to their careers, to their studies, encouraging them to make those personal connections, or rather making them for them and making them very explicit connections between themselves and the broader community. So notions of responsibility, citizenship, stewardship, and so on. We want relevance to their discipline, but to highlight the need for interdisciplinary approaches to identifying solutions to sustainability challenges. And where possible, the resource has a number of examples of UE academics are contributing short videos on particular issues. We're using examples of UE as an institution for practice, and also focusing on the many sustainable projects that exist around Bristol. We're very lucky in the degree of activity that goes on in the Bristol region, so trying to draw on that where possible. Some learning outcomes, and as I say, very low level, encouraging students or helping students to develop an awareness of the core principles of sustainability, helping them to understand the language of sustainability, to appreciate the importance of this, and to again appreciate the relevance of an interdisciplinary approach, which will then enable them to focus on their discipline-specific issues through the context of their studies, of their degree studies. So I think that was a point I haven't perhaps mentioned, is that this is a non-credit bearing resource, although many tutors that I've spoken to intend to make it a core part of their first year modules. So that's up to, it's nice that tutors are viewing it as that, to be using it in that way. So this is what we've got as a framework, although what you'll be working on is, we've had a slight amendment since this was put together. We're focusing on organisations rather than industry, and we're replacing the very gendered image of a shirt and tie to represent the workplace. But It's a graphic design issue, not mine. So what we've got is an overview where students have an introduction to the resource, but then they are introduced to some of those basic principles of sustainability, and I want you to be focusing on what they are in the workshop, and then applying those principles to a range of personal contexts. So from their own personal lifestyle point of view, from their household, their community, their current or future workplace, organisations, as I say, rather than industry, so a broader business focus. We're not going to deal with that today, but that's where there's a bit of discipline-specific content that's at the moment structured around the faculties of this university, and students will undertake 2 sections, so one that they're familiar with and one that they're perhaps less familiar with, and then a global perspective before we tie it all off at the end. So that's the framework that we are currently working with, and the activity that we're going to focus on now has 3 parts. The core thing is for us to develop a sense of what it is students absolutely need to know within the context of those individual sections. I'll be allocating sections to the tables. For us to focus on, okay, if somebody's not necessarily a student, even a staff member, is coming at this and we're wanting to create a baseline, and I'm hoping that this activity will be useful not just to us in this resource development, but for you to be thinking about core issues that you might take forward to your institutions. Up to 10, and then the sort of third part of the activity will be, as a group, we will vote with some aid of some technology on what we consider to be the most important of those that are brainstormed in the individual groups. I'm not doing self-allocation now because Charlotte has very kindly arranged you all into groups already, so I will just come round with the sheets. And there are Keys members located on each table who will just take a record. On the flip chart sheets, actually, every flip chart has got a section on it, so you might just need to flip back. Sustainable Lifestyles is on this one. If you could flip back on those 2, Nick. We'll have 2 sheets at each. I'm going to move those around, but they will be your sections, and just brainstorm what are the kind of threshold concepts. If somebody was only looking at sustainability in the context of organisations for an hour or 2, what would be the core things that would need to be explained? Is that reasonably clear? Okay, so I'll bring around all the sheets, and we'll have a good 15 or 20 minutes brainstorming some of this, and coming up, if there are more than 10 identified, if you could narrow it down to 10 on your particular themes. Okay, thanks. Well, we're going to have to draw a line under it. As most of you know, the coffee is available. What we're just going to do now for 5 or 6 minutes only, while Ollie transfers all of those ideas onto the electronic voting system, is to get up, we might spread the boards out a little bit, and to start looking at the responses of other groups. And what you'll be doing with those electronic clickers is voting for your top 3 of the 10 issues under each section heading. And we'll see whether we can get any sense of agreement about which are the core issues. If people, really needed to understand about sustainable communities, would it be issues of empowerment that would be top? So in preparation for that, if you sort of hop up and have a look at the lists that have been created on the flip charts, and start thinking about how you will vote when each of those lists is available for voting. So get yourselves a coffee, or take a short break when we're sort of into the last half hour or so of the day anyway, but get yourselves a refreshment, have a look at the lists, and if you've got any further additions to those core issues, they can be added, and I'll feed those back to Ollie as well. And we'll reconvene in about 5 minutes' time to do that voting exercise. Okay. Hopefully you've had a chance to view some of the lists. We will hold each slide on for a short amount of time, but being aware of the overall time, we'll try and move through it fairly swiftly. So each question we'll hold up. We're monitoring the responses as they come through. So once we've got, how many have we got? 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and I'll be 20. We've got 20. So once we get sort of a critical number of responses, then we'll close the polling for each question. So could you just pass me that one, Adele?
We're just choosing one.
Yeah, so you can choose three, forgive the spelling, Ollie's just translated those in rapid time, so there may be the odd typo. So, yeah, so we've got the first 3 questions will be on those overarching principles. We've got environmental, social and economic. So as a backdrop to understanding sustainability, are there 3 of these which stand out for you as being most relevant? So you will have the option of selecting 3. When you press a button, a small light on your clicker will light up to show you that you've made your selection. And the responses are coming through. We've got 12 in the room. So as I say, we'll try and hold each one up until we've got, at least 15 or 16 responses. And it will show the results once we close polling.
Sorry, did you say how many?
3. There, we've got 10 on each. You may, if you were responsible, you press 3 separate numbers on there. You can select A to I, 3 of those options. Press the corresponding button to make your selection. It won't register you for
the last 3 that you press are the ones that are registered.
Oh, sorry, there we go. Thanks, Ollie. The last 3 that you press are the responses. No, once you've selected 3, it will register you as having responded. We've got 18 responses there. I think we'll call that one to a close. So, Ollie, if you... Okay, so this is a number count. So the number of people who selected each item there. We'll save these and we'll make these available as part of the resources from the day. So, but clearly Earth as a system is a core principle that we all, or many of us feel, is a critical issue. Okay, so we'll move on to the next question. Social principles of sustainability. The context, remember, is that if students understand these, they can then apply them to these different contexts that we've been discussing in our groups. Okay, 19 responses, and I think that's probably sufficient. I'm not quite sure how many we've got.
Ready?
Yeah, ready for that one. Okay, equality and justice, so they're fairly clear, basic. Great. Expand them out. If you stretch it out, Ollie, will it? 8 there. That looks like health and well. Is it health and well-being? Hang on. Yeah, stretch it out, Ollie, as you do. Is it that one?
Yeah. It's intergeneration.
And cultural awareness.
And then health and well, right?
Yeah. Okay. Next one.
Next.
Economics. Press your new 3 answers. It will record those last 3 responses. So you're going to be thinking about it far too much, Andrew. We don't want your response.
You're a heterodox.
Okay. Yeah.
Could get to 11.
Okay, that will do. Okay. Oh, so less obvious there. Circular economy. Not growth. Interesting.
Much closer, aren't
So less clear, and I think that that's partly reflected in the economic sheets.
Yeah.
Had fewer ideas on them, fewer core concepts on them. So I think that is an area that might reflect something about the background of the people in the room as not being economists. Okay, so now we'll be on to the contexts. So these are the translations of the flip charts. Sustainable lifestyles. Not quite 3 votes still. There weren't quite 10. I suppose we could have separated out those final sections, but.
Do we have a none of the above?
You can abstain. I mean, we could easily follow this up with discussion about where these fit.
Yeah, I would have picked
Yes.
food. and
Yeah. I've seen them on the sheet.
Something they may not have made it from that sheet onto the sheet Ollie was working off, but we'll work from that.
6 on here.
Yeah, they didn't make it onto the sheet. That will do. 18. That's 18. Okay. I mean, I think, there's another discussion to be had about what we would have chosen if there were alternative options on the table. But again, aside from finance, there's not a huge difference there. Okay, we'll move on to the household.
Leave finance, something like that off though. No, not just speaking as but that's one of the problems.
Yeah, it is, absolutely, Andrew. Yeah.
Failure to budget out.
Yeah, and maybe it could be included in the economic principles and applied in a different context. But I think this highlights one of the challenges if we are trying to achieve a baseline, and if people are generally resistant, and we've got a limited amount of time and space to communicate these issues. What are the most important things to try and get across in that limited space of time while we have people's attention? So a household context, and perhaps some of those lifestyle issues that you're expecting to see are actually included here. Okay, 19 looks pretty good. That's pretty clear then. Energy, food, and consumption as the core issues. And okay, that's clear. Yeah, that's communities. Some very detailed discussions going on the table about communities, and this is a highlight of those. Okay. Yep. Global citizenship. Yeah, again, 3 do kind of stand out there. Social cohesion, social responsibility, global citizenship, perhaps some overlap there. But in terms of highlighting the terminology, I mean, I think those phrases of social cohesion and global citizenship are some of those jargonistic phrases that we use so often in our discussions that are not as familiar to those who don't write and talk about sustainability as frequently. So I think that would be a valuable core principle. And just the last couple, workplace environments. The intention here was partly about physical premises, the employees and the estates, rather than the organisational strategy and so on. Okay, I think we're ready on that one. Less obvious there. Empowerment, work-life balance, democracy and workers' rights, slightly ahead there, and a couple that are less health And I guess there is overlap between health and work-life balance, for example. So maybe just one of those encapsulates some of the others. And then I think the final, we've got organisations and global to tie us off. Audit TNS.
The natural step.
A natural step, okay. So perhaps we might take that widely as being auditing processes. Okay, yep. All right, so supply chain, which clearly would also include process and product. Embedded organisational culture, again, that would encapsulate some of the employee governance and life cycle. I mean, life cycle analysis and process and product and supply chain, there's a lot of overlap there. So again, I think there are some core terms that we could take forward from that. And then finally, the global, which I guess is the, supranational organisational things, the role of UNESCO, some of the global community kinds of issues. There's clearly some overlap between the original principles, and that would be a tidy story to tell, actually, that there's the principles, there's the context, and then we sort of return to some of those principles. But some also different issues there. And the issue about Rio is one that we've been debating about. How important is it for students to understand the origins of these developments? Is that harping back? Is that important in terms of creating sustainable futures? And again, in a crowded context of a crowded curricula for our learning resource, that's one of the things that's on the edge of being included. But let's take the results there. Earth as a system, which returns to where we started with the principles as being a core issue, and social justice, and that issue of inter and intergenerational. Okay, well, that's taken us through all of those questions. Hopefully you've found that process of thinking about the issues and seeing how others vote on those issues useful, and perhaps things you can take forward to your back to your institutions. So thank you very much for taking part in the workshop. And for the final wrap-up, just return to Jim. And again, thanks very much. And thank you to Ollie as well for...
Thank you, Ollie. That was a lot of fine work, very quickly. I don't intend to say very much. This is on the agenda in sort of two alternates. One, it was the crumple zone into which overspill of activity for the afternoon could take place, and really that's what we've used very productively. I found this afternoon fascinating, insightful, and incredibly helpful. And I'd like to thank all of you for participation. We have used your brain power to help us along on some of our challenges, and we've heard from the NUS input into this, which has been absolutely critical underpinning for the sorts of things we are trying to do as institutions, not just this university. By way of reflection and observation on the day that we have shared together, is there anything anyone would like to offer by way of parting comment? Any observation? Any summary statement? Because I can do all of that stuff for you. But if there's anything anyone would like to say, now's the chance. A chance just to summarise the day. It is an hour fast, that clock, by the way, in case anybody's very worried.
I thought it was worthwhile.
Worthwhile, thank you. Lots of nods. So we will, as the clock comes up on the second hand to the hour, we said 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock it is. I'm going to say I've really enjoyed it. A little bit earlier this morning, we had some worries about whether we would actually have Simon in the room electronically, but all came good. And from then on, it's just been an absolutely brilliant day. I'd like to thank all the speakers, not all are still in the room, but for those who are, could we just give a round of applause to everyone that's worked really hard? And with that, I think, unless there's anything I've forgotten, Georgie? Oh yes, I did mention before and I'll repeat it now. We will collate all of the things that have been shared today, photographs of the flip charts, the turning point outcomes, and all the stuff, all the paraphernalia, and we'll work out how best to how to make sure that you all have it. One thing that has been asked of us is, would anyone object to their email address being shared with the participants?
It's already been sent round by HEA.
Okay, well, we were asked. So, hey, you can connect with everybody. Yes, and a final request from the HEA would be, as you return to your institutions and to your own networks, if you could promote the remaining 5 events in this HEA series, including the 9th of January at the University of Bristol. Could I encourage all of you, if you haven't already, encourage your own institution to respond to the QAA and HEA consultation. Then there's just a few weeks left to do that. 3rd of January is the deadline. And you have the 2 dates for the HEFCE consultation event in London. It's the 30th of January. If you go to Leeds, you'll miss the Bristol event and come to London and go to Bristol as well. And with that, can I say thank you again. Safe journey back to wherever it is. And it's over, folks. Time to enjoy the weekend.